I found out my wife had stopped loving me because she forgot to hang up the phone. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of ordinary Tuesday you never think will split your life into before and after. I called her from the parking lot behind my office. Sitting in my truck with the AC running and a turkey sandwich still wrapped in paper on the passenger seat. I always called around 12:20. It was our little routine, 5 minutes, check in, confirm who was picking up our daughter, figure out dinner. Talk about nothing important in the comfortable way married people do when they think there will be 1,000 more conversations after this one. My wife Vanessa answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said, distracted but warm enough. I could hear cabinet doors in the background and the faint hum of the dishwasher. "Hey, you still good to grab Sophie by 5:30? "Yeah. Unless traffic is insane. If I'm late, can you get her?" "I can. What do you want for dinner?" She laughed softly. "Something I don't have to cook." Very reasonable. We talked about pasta, then preschool picture day, then whether Sophie's rain boots still fit. Small stuff, normal stuff, the kind of exchange that should have reassured me we were fine. Before hanging up, I said, "Love you." Vanessa said it back right away. "Love you too." Then there was a click. But the line stayed open. At first, I thought maybe it had switched over to Bluetooth in the kitchen and she hadn't realized it. I was about to end the call myself when I heard another voice, a woman. Sharp, familiar, the same friend I'd heard in the background at birthday dinners and girls' nights and Saturday coffee runs. "So," the woman asked, "how's married life today?" Vanessa let out a laugh. Not the laugh she used with me. Not polite, not tired, not distracted. This one had teeth. "Honestly," she said, "I can't do another 20 years of this." Something in my chest tightened. My hand froze around the phone. The friend said, "That bad?" "Worse because it's boring," Vanessa said. "Nothing is wrong enough to blow up over. He's just like living inside an oatmeal commercial." I stared through the windshield at the brick wall behind my office and felt my sandwich slide out of my hand into my lap. The friend laughed. Vanessa kept going. "He's nice. He's reliable. He's predictable. He apologizes when someone else bumps into him. He asks his mom's opinion before he buys patio furniture. I swear, if confidence could be bought at Costco, I'd put a pallet of it in the garage." They both laughed again. I should have hung up right then. Any normal person would have. Instead, I sat there in total silence. Like, if I moved even an inch, I might miss a word that would explain how my marriage had turned into something unrecognizable without me noticing. The friend lowered her voice a little. "Then why stay?" Vanessa didn't answer immediately. I heard a drawer shut. A glass set down on the counter. Then she said, "Because I'm not stupid." The air in the truck suddenly felt thin. "His family is basically a real estate empire with nicer manners," she said. "His father handed us that house like it was a welcome basket. His mother pays half of Sophie's preschool without even calling it help. And Caleb, that was me, will spend the rest of his life trying not to disappoint everybody." You think a woman walks away from that kind of stability because she's uninspired? The friend gave a low whistle. "Wow." "I'm just being honest," Vanessa said. "He's safe. Safe is useful. Useful. Not loved. Not chosen. Useful." I don't know how long I sat there after that. Long enough for the AC to start rattling. Long enough for my sandwich to go warm. Long enough that when I finally ended the call, my screen showed 11 minutes and 13 seconds. The actual conversation with me had been barely 5. The rest of it was the part she never meant for me to hear. I went back into the office and spent the rest of the afternoon pretending numbers on my screen meant something. A guy from accounting asked if I wanted in on a March Madness pool, and I just looked at him like he'd spoken another language. At 4:30, I packed up, drove to daycare, and watched my daughter come running out in purple sneakers with a construction paper crown taped crooked across her forehead. "Daddy," Sophie yelled, like she hadn't seen me in a year. I caught her, held her. breathed in the strawberry shampoo from her hair. "You're squeezing," she said, giggling. "Yeah," I said. "I know." When we got home, Vanessa was at the stove stirring red sauce in our kitchen like the world had not quietly ended in a parking lot 3 hours earlier. She turned and smiled. "Hey, I thought you were working late. Wrapped up early?" She leaned up and kissed my cheek. Perfect timing. "Sophie, wash hands." I stood there holding my keys, looking at this woman I had known for 8 years, married for 5, and for the first time I had the distinct, nauseating feeling that I was living beside a stranger who had studied my habits well enough to pass for my wife. Dinner was pasta, garlic bread, and preschool stories about a boy named Mason who got put in time out for licking paint. Vanessa laughed in all the right places. She asked me whether my mother was still planning to host Sunday lunch. She reminded me the HOA fee was due Friday. She touched my shoulder when she passed behind my chair. Every movement was so normal it made me feel crazy. Around 3 in the morning, Sophie cried from her room after a bad dream. I went to get her before Vanessa even stirred. My daughter wrapped both arms around my neck and fell back asleep against my shoulder while I sat with her in the rocker under the moon-shaped nightlight. In the half-dark, with her warm little body settled against me, I had a thought so clear it scared me. Whatever was true between Vanessa and me, I could not afford to keep sleepwalking through it just because facing it would hurt. The next morning, I called my father. Not because he has all the answers. He doesn't, but because he is one of those men who can listen to bad news without rushing to fill the silence, and at that moment, I needed silence more than reassurance. He picked up on the first ring. "Everything okay?" "No," I said. I told him the whole thing while sitting in my truck before work, the open line, the laughter, the house, the word useful. I expected him to get angry. Instead, he was quiet long enough that I checked the screen to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Finally, he asked, "What are you going to do?" I rubbed my forehead. "I don't know yet." "Then decide before someone else decides for you." "That's not really helpful." "It's not supposed to be comforting," he said. "It's supposed to be true." I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. My father went on, "You've spent your whole life confusing peace with passivity. Those are not the same thing. One comes from strength. The other comes from fear." That landed harder than anything Vanessa had said, because she wasn't entirely wrong about one thing. I had spent years smoothing edges, keeping everyone calm, avoiding difficult conversations until they turned into permanent conditions. My mother criticized Vanessa's decorating. I changed the subject. Vanessa snapped at me in front of friends. I told myself she was stressed. My uncle hinted I didn't have the nerve to step into a bigger role in the family company. I laughed it off and stayed right where I was. I called it being easy to live with. Maybe other people called it weakness. For the next 12 days, I said almost nothing. I didn't absolutely have to say. Not in the dramatic way. I still packed lunches, still buckled Sophie into her car seat, still answered work emails, still nodded along when Vanessa complained about a woman in her yoga class who always stole the front mirror. But inside, something had gone cold and orderly. I met with an attorney my father recommended. A woman named Denise Harper who wore navy suits and had the unnerving habit of finishing your sentence only when she was sure she'd finish it correctly. I told her I needed to understand my options. She asked a lot of practical questions. Whose name was on the house? What assets were marital? What had been gifted? What had been inherited? Whether there were accounts Vanessa could access that needed to be protected legally and cleanly without anything impulsive that could backfire later. For the first time since that phone call, my thoughts had somewhere useful to go. Facts, paperwork, timelines, things that did not care how confused I felt. At Denise's advice, I pulled bank statements, trust documents, and copies of the deed. My father had set up a family trust years earlier with all the usual guardrails. Wealthy families pretend are about stewardship and values when really they're about control. Until then, I'd barely paid attention to any of it. Suddenly, I read every line. I also started paying attention in ways I should have paid attention long before. Vanessa smiled at her phone a lot. She started going to an evening strength class on Thursdays she had never mentioned before. Not once, just suddenly it was part of her routine. I told you, she said the first time I asked. She hadn't. A name showed up on our phone records over and over. No saved contact on the bill, just the same number appearing late at night and during lunch hours. Long message threads, short calls, repeated enough that it stopped looking random. I didn't confront her, not yet. I don't know if that makes me patient or calculating. Maybe both. But I'd learned enough by then to understand that once a lie knows you're looking at it, it changes shape. One Friday afternoon, I was alone in our den working from home when Vanessa's iPad lit up on the side table. Sophie had used it that morning for an alphabet game and left it there. A message banner flashed across the screen before it went dark. Can't stop thinking about last night. I just stared at it. No name, just the preview. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The implication was already sitting in the room with me. I picked up the iPad, turned it face down, and went to the kitchen sink because I suddenly thought I might throw up. That evening, we had dinner with my parents. My mother, as always, found a way to turn roast chicken into a referendum on my life choices. "Caleb," she said while passing green beans, "your father says you turned down the Midtown project again. It wasn't the right fit." "For whom?" she asked sweetly. Vanessa looked down at her plate. There it was. The old familiar scene, my mother pressing, my wife watching, me deciding whether peace in the room was worth another tiny surrender. Normally, I would have smiled and shrugged and redirected everyone toward football or weather or Sophie's latest obsession with dinosaurs. Instead, I set down my fork and said, "For me." My mother blinked. I kept my voice even. "And with respect, I'm not discussing work decisions over chicken." The table went very still. My father took a sip of water without saying a word. Vanessa looked at me for half a second, startled. Like she had just noticed a piece of furniture move on its own. My mother gave a little laugh. "Well, all right then." It was a tiny moment. Nothing anyone else would remember a week later. But I remembered Vanessa's face. The following Monday, Denise called to say everything was in place if I decided to move forward. That same night, after Sophie was asleep, Vanessa sat cross-legged on the couch in an oversized sweatshirt, smiling down at her phone. The smile was private. Not for me. Something in me settled. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, set it down, and said, "We need to talk." She didn't look up right away. That usually means something expensive broke. "It's about us." That got her attention. She set the phone beside her. "Okay." I stayed standing. I think part of me knew if I sat down, this conversation might drift into another soft circular argument where I left the room apologizing for bringing up my own pain too bluntly. So I stood. "2 Tuesdays ago," I said. "You forgot to hang up after our lunch call." Her face changed instantly, but only for a second. Then she recovered. "What?" "I heard you talking to Melissa in the kitchen." Color drained from her cheeks. I went on before she could interrupt. "I heard you say I was boring, that staying married to me was easier than walking away from my family's money, that I was safe and useful." She stared at me. Not crying, not angry, just caught. "Caleb." I'm not finished. That was new too. I could hear it myself. A steadiness that hadn't lived in my voice before. I spent 12 days hoping there was some context that would make those words smaller. There isn't. I met with an attorney. I reviewed everything. The trust has been restructured. My lawyer will file tomorrow. She shook her head fast, like if she moved enough, maybe reality would blur. "You talked to a lawyer before talking to me?" "Yes." "Oh my God." She stood up. You listened to one bad conversation and decided to blow up our family? One bad conversation? You were spying on me. The call was still connected. You should have hung up. I almost laughed at that. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. You're right, I said. I probably should have, but I didn't, and now we're here. Her eyes filled then, quick and shiny. I was venting. Melissa and I say terrible things sometimes. Everyone complains about their marriage. Do most people also describe their spouse as a financial strategy? That's not what I meant. Then tell me what you meant. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. I asked the next question carefully, because once I said it out loud, there was no taking it back. Who is Owen? Her head jerked toward me. That was enough. I didn't need the answer after that. Her hand went to her chest. You went through my messages. I reviewed records. I paid attention. That's all. It's not what you think. I nodded slowly. I think it's exactly what it looks like. She started crying then, really crying now, with that panicked edge people get when consequences finally arrive in the room before they do. She came toward me and reached for my hand. I stepped back. Please don't do this, she whispered. Please, Sophie. I hated that she said our daughter's name like a shield. I kept my voice low. I'm not doing this to Sophie. I'm doing this because I finally understand what I'm standing inside. That's not fair. No, I said. What wasn't fair was sitting across from me every night, letting me believe I was loved while you were measuring me against what I could provide. That is not what this was. Then what was it? Again, nothing. The silence told the truth her words couldn't organize fast enough. I picked up the folder from the kitchen counter and placed it on the coffee table between us. You already did all this, she said. Yes. Her tears stopped almost as quickly as they'd started. I watched disbelief give way to something else. Fear, maybe. Or calculation. What am I supposed to do? She asked. I thought of the parking lot, the laugh. Useful. Then I heard my father's voice from that first morning after the call. Decide before someone else decides for you. So I gave her the same mercy he had given me. Figure it out, I said. She moved into a furnished apartment 14 days later. The man whose number filled our phone logs turned out not to be nearly as interested in building a future as he had been in borrowing excitement from someone else's marriage. Once everything got real, lawyers, schedules, money, responsibility. He drifted exactly the way men like that tend to drift. Vanessa called me crying about it once, 3 months after she moved out. I almost didn't answer. But Sophie was with my parents that weekend. And part of me wanted to know if the woman I had married existed anywhere beneath the performance, or if I had imagined her from the beginning. I made a mess of everything, she said. Yes, I said. I didn't think you would actually leave. That sentence sat between us for a long moment. Not I didn't mean it. Not I was wrong. Just, I didn't think you would actually leave. That more than anything told me the truth. She had built her life around my reluctance to act, around my tolerance, my patience, my instinct to smooth and absorb and endure. She had mistaken my restraint for the absence of a lime. She wasn't the first person to make that mistake. She might have been the last. A year has passed now. Sophie is 4 and thinks pancakes shaped like dinosaurs are the highest form of fatherhood. I moved my schedule around so I can do daycare drop-off 3 mornings a week. I took the Midtown project my mother used to needle me about, not because she wanted me to, but because for once I wanted something badly enough to risk failing in public. I also started saying no without writing a speech in my head first. No, Mom. Sunday lunch doesn't work for us this week. No, I'm not free to cover that meeting. No, that arrangement doesn't make sense. No is a surprisingly peaceful word once you stop treating it like a crime. People in my life have noticed the difference. My father notices most, though he pretends not to. Last month, we were walking a property line together outside one of the family developments, dress shoes sinking into red Georgia clay, and he said, "You seem steadier." I looked at him. Is that your version of a compliment? It's as close as you're getting. I laughed, and he did too. As for Vanessa, we keep things civil for Sophie. We exchange backpacks and bedtime medicine and preschool artwork. We stand 6 feet apart at birthday parties and clap when our daughter smears frosting on her face. Sometimes I catch Vanessa studying me with a strange expression. Not regret exactly, more like confusion. Like she still can't reconcile the man she thought she married with the man who finally stood up from the table and walked away. Maybe I can't reconcile them either. But I know this much now. There's a difference between being kind and being compliant. Between being safe and being small. Between loving deeply and disappearing inside that love so completely that someone else mistakes your silence for permission. For a long time, I thought strength had to look loud to count. I thought men who kept the peace were good men, and men who drew hard lines were selfish or cold. I don't believe that anymore. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for your child is refuse to model a life built on quiet humiliation. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is believe what you heard the first time, even when it breaks your heart. And sometimes the man everyone assumes will keep taking it is the one who eventually leaves so calmly it changes the temperature of the whole room. Vanessa once called me safe like it was an insult. She wasn't entirely wrong. I am safe. For my daughter. For the life I'm building now. For the version of myself I had abandoned piece by piece and finally came back for. But I'm not useful to people who confuse gentleness with weakness anymore. And I'm never going back to being the man who thought enduring disrespect was the plan. Same thing as love.